Good afternoon and welcome to today's presentation of the 2020 conference for the Association of Recovery High Schools, Association of Recovery in Higher Education and the Association of Alternative Peer Groups. My name's Olivia Pinelli and I'll be your host today. We're joined by Dr. Dory Hoffman from the University of South Carolina, and the topic of today's presentation is Experiences of Students in Collegiate Recovery Programs, a critical case study. Just a few logistics that I want to remind you of. Today's presentation will be recorded and uploaded to YouTube. It will be on a private link, so it will only be available to conference attendees and presenters. You'll be able to go back and access all the information at any time if you're registered for the conference. We ask that nobody shares this information unless you're registered without our consent beforehand. Conference sessions are approved by a number of continuing education providers. To find out more information about that, have a look at our website. And if you have any more questions, please email conference@collegiaterecovery.org. Thanks for joining us today, Dory. Before I turn it over to you, I'd like to read a quick bio. So Dr. Dory Hoffman is an adjunct English professor at Midlands Technical College and the University of South Carolina. Hoffman wrote her dissertation on the essential role of collegiate recovery programs, and she has a PhD in higher education. So I'm going to turn it over to you.
Great, thank you so much, Olivia. So happy to be here today. Okay, so welcome everyone, and thanks so much for joining. I hope everyone is doing well. As Olivia mentioned, my study is called The Experiences of Students in Collegiate Recovery Programs, a critical case study. I would like to take this time to thank the Association of College and University Housing Officers International, who funded this study. Presentation abstract. This presentation features findings from a critical ethnographic case study on the experiences of college students in recovery. I conducted interviews with 8 students in collegiate recovery programs with on-campus living experience. Data collection occurred at 2 four-year institutions on the East Coast that lack sober living options. This presentation includes major study findings, ideas for future research, and policy suggestions. I will also be discussing substance use prevention and its intersection with technology, as well as providing step-by-step instructions for duplicating this study. I have an MFA in creative writing and a PhD in education administration. I am an adjunct English professor, and my dissertation explored the success of collegiate recovery programs and communities and the impact of housing on students in recovery. I have my social media and email information here. Please feel free to contact me. I will also provide this information at the end of the presentation. Some background information on the US college drug epidemic. Currently, 23% of full-time college students on campus living have alcohol and other drug addictions. This compares to just 8.5% of the general population. Half of full-time college students in the United States binge drink, take illicit drugs, or both. Drug use has been linked with poor academic performance, low graduation rates, overdose, and death. There are high-risk subpopulations in college, meaning subpopulations at college in the United States that are at the highest risk for drug misuse and addiction. The highest risk subpopulation is Greek life, which includes fraternity and sorority members, followed by student athletes, students with on-campus living experience, and students with mental illness. For these reasons in my study, I had students that represented these high-risk groups. Another trend in the US college drug epidemic is the fentanyl epidemic. Fentanyl is currently the most popular opiate in college. It has been found to be mixed with cocaine and MDMA, also known as ecstasy, by illicit drug dealers. Currently, fentanyl is priced in the United States as 90% cheaper than heroin. It is also 50 to 100 times more strong than morphine. And marijuana remains the most popular illicit drug in college campuses in the United States and has been increasing in use due to a variety of factors. Most issues that are researched, such as addiction recovery and collegiate recovery, most research on these issues are quantitative, which means they are survey-based. This study fills a gap in the literature using qualitative methods. While there's a wealth of quantitative data on the issue, which is very helpful, it's also important to have qualitative methodologies with students in addiction recovery so they can have a space to tell their own stories. The research questions of this study are as follows. What are the experiences of college students in recovery? How do they describe academic success? What barriers do college students in recovery face? What role does on-campus living play in the United States college drug epidemic? And what support do students in CRPs and CRCs have? The research sites, which I use pseudonyms for, took place on the East Coast in the United States. They are Middletown University and Walter University. Both are four-year co-educational, predominantly white institutions, also known as PWIs. MU is a liberal arts college with 10,000 undergrads, and WU is a university with 26,000 undergrads. To be in the study, participants needed to have undergraduate status, on-campus living experience, be 18 years of age or older, or enrolled in a CRP or CRC. I utilized the frameworks critical ethnography, case study, and phenomenology. Critical ethnography, which stems from critical theory, includes such theories as critical race theory and critical feminism. I used critical theory to look at the ways power and oppression work in our society in terms of social justice, the way that populations like college students in recovery can be silenced and underrepresented. I used case study to organize the experiences of the students. As qualitative methodology is different from quantitative research, it does not seek to generalize or predict. That means that case studies of these students are not representative of all students in recovery, but each student is telling their own story to give insight to the larger culture sharing experience that are students in addiction recovery on a college campus. I also use phenomenology, which explores the lived experience of participants. Phenomenology is a great critical framework because it uses philosophy to look into the day-to-day lives of participants to see what their lives are really like. I conducted personal interviews with 8 participants for 45 to 60 minutes. I conducted 3 rounds of interviews from October 2019 to February 2020. I also utilized photo elicitation to elicit memories and emotions. Photo elicitation is a qualitative methodology which asks participants to take pictures and share them in the interview. Because college students have their smartphones with them at all time, photo elicitation was a great and free way to have students capture their own experience. I asked participants to take pictures around campus during winter break, on vacation, and in their living spaces. I asked students to take pictures between the second and third rounds of interviews and bring those pictures to the third round of interviews. I asked participants to take pictures of triggers on campus that made their recovery difficult or just any low points in their mental health. As a college professor, and as I can imagine other people working in higher education, we work hard to provide a safe space for our students, but we don't know what the campus looks like through our students' eyes. So photo elicitation allowed participants to show me, the researcher, what the campus looks like through their eyes. It also helped during the interview process as it elicited memories that may have been repressed or forgotten. I then analyzed the data by using coding methods where I looked for repeated words, phrases, and emotions. I triangulated the data, making sure that any research findings were present in the photography, the interview transcripts, and I checked it against previous studies. I used over 200 sources in my literature review, as this was a qualitative dissertation study that was over 300 pages. So the benefit of looking at 200 sources meant that I had almost 200 studies on addiction recovery in the college campus setting to compare my findings with. I also engaged in member checking, which means I reached out to all 8 participants, and before I used a single quote in any dissertation study, conference presentation, or article, I made sure that they were okay with the quotes I was using. I used pseudonyms for all research sites, geographic locations, and participants, but I still engaged in member checking to ensure I had authentic representation of these participant stories. Even though I recorded the interview audio, transcribed it, I wanted to make sure that they were okay with every quote I used so that they were comfortable with how they were being represented. I also engaged in analytic memos, which was reflexive journaling, so that I could check my biases as a researcher and ensure that I was engaging in authentic representation. I also met with a qualitative methodologist to ensure my coding methods and themes were ethical, as well as engaging in multiple participant meetings. By that, I mean I attended Collegiate Recovery Program social events like pizza nights, coffee nights. I met with Collegiate Recovery Program directors, and sometimes I would just bring my research journal and exist in the space just to get to know the participants outside of the clinical interview stage. Meet the participants. I had 4 participants from Middletown University and 4 participants from Walter University. Calvin, Kelsey, Tyler, Xerxes, AJ, Brandon, Drew, and Laura. As I have pseudonyms for all participants, I also am not showing their real pictures, so I use these computer-generated images. You'll note that at least half the participants are 25 years or older, which is common of students in addiction recovery, as many students in addiction recovery in college take time off from college and transfer schools. As I analyzed the data for this study, I had 13 main findings. Most participants stated campus did not cause their addiction, but greatly increased access to alcohol and other drugs. All participants were in one high-risk group, on-campus living experience, and most participants were in 3 or more high-risk groups. Again, high-risk groups are subpopulations such as students with mental illness, Greek life, and student athletes. Most participants had negative experiences in 12-step earlier in recovery, but found great benefit for 12-step programs later in recovery. But in general, they were just more comfortable in their collegiate recovery programs as they were around a younger community, and it really focused on helping them with college. None of the participants chose to live on campus as they maintained their sobriety. Most participants felt that on-campus living presented what's called an abstinence hostile environment. Addiction researchers use this term to explain an environment that is really dangerous to someone trying to maintain their sobriety. Also, as mentioned, college students in recovery tend to be older and don't feel comfortable living on campus with first-year students that are younger. All participants expressed the wonderful benefits of CRPs, CRP directors, and had great ideas for their own CRCs, which I'll share later. 7 participants have 1 or more mental illness, with 3 participants expressing suicidal ideation. When working with students that express suicidal ideation during data collection, I checked in with them and made sure that the data collection process did not add any undue stress. And I checked in with their CRP directors to make sure they're doing okay. And I continue to be in contact with them and text them and make sure that they're doing okay. Another finding was that all participants were unaware of university policies to deter students from alcohol and other drug use. Most students did not get into legal trouble for their substance use for 2 to 3 years into their addiction, with one outlier, as one participant is still struggling with legal trouble. Many participants stated they actively tried to get arrested for their substance use, seeing that that was the only way they could get help on a college campus. All participants stated their academic goals were to graduate, and most stated GPA was important. They all felt overwhelmed, but did not seriously consider withdrawing, and they all faced unique barriers to their education. Within these 13 main findings, there were 3 main themes. The first theme, which was the largest theme, was student barriers. In addition to the common barriers that college students face, college students in addiction recovery face a variety of additional barriers. For example, campus culture and college environments, as well as 12-step programs, can be catalysts for substance access. Greek life and student athletes also lack accountability in substance misuse. Greek life is so prominent in substance misuse, some addiction researchers use the term Greek life as a proxy for addiction and recovery. Students in Greek life have the most representation of students who use drugs, misuse drugs, and have active addictions. 80% of Greek life members living on campus in the United States have a polysubstance use addiction, meaning they are addicted to one or more substances. Student athletes also lack accountability and supervision, as they are often traveling and are not around residential advisors or RAs, and there's a severe lack of accountability in the drug-free life that they promise they will abide by. There's also just a lack of sober spaces on college campuses in the United States. Another theme is students in recovery. A lot of them do struggle with mental illness, so they struggle to find help from psychologists and psychiatrists that practice what's called looking at addiction and mental health, called dual diagnosis. Most recovery resources are also off campus. One of the biggest student barriers were triggers like alcohol and other drug use. Again, the term AOD stands for alcohol and other drugs, as alcohol itself is a drug. So a lot of these triggers for students in recoveries include bars on campus, dab pens, and illicit drug sales on social media. For people that may be unfamiliar with what dab pens are, they are known as vaporizers or vapes. They have 60 to 99% THC, which is the active ingredient in marijuana. That compares to just 30% THC found in traditional-based plant marijuana. While plant marijuana has a strong pungent smell that alerts residential advisors and other people on campus that people are consuming marijuana, dab pens are odorless and used in public undetected. The next slide shows pictures of dab pens, which is a form of drug paraphernalia. So I just want to give a warning in case that is triggering to anyone. So within this theme, there was a sub-theme that I found the intersection of substance use and technology. While the so-called vaping epidemic has been in the news in the United States, what the CDC has reported is that the people that are actually dying and overdosing from vape use has been from illicit vapes with THC content. So for the first time in the history of marijuana's use, marijuana is actually leading to overdose and death. However, traditional vapes that just have apple juice or nicotine are still found to be 95% safer than cigarettes. So while this researcher is not calling for a ban on vapes, it's important to note the danger of dab vape pens. This is a picture of a dab vape pen. These pens actually write. So they have actual ink in them, and they hold a milliliter of THC concentrate. Dab is also known as the crack cocaine of marijuana because it is really cheap to use and has such a concentrated use that one hit can cause intoxication, severe heart problems, and it's just really rampant on college campuses in the United States. It only costs a couple dollars a day. It is cheaper than cigarettes. I have seen at both research sites, students, faculty, and staff using these pens. They're so discreet that students can use them during class undetected. They can write with these pens, they put the end of the pen cap in their mouth, inhale, and use them as vape pens. So I have witnessed students using these dab vape pens in class, during class, USB charging them in the library, in computer stations, professors, teacher stations. They're just basically everywhere. And it's really difficult to know when students are using these, because even the ones that don't look like pens look like any other vape. So these dab vape pens are identical to vapes, which may just have apple juice. An average vaporizer pen just has apple juice in it, and then the person can choose to add nicotine, THC, or CBD. So the fact that they're identical to traditional vapes and actual writing pens make these really difficult to work with detection. However, seeing these pens on campus can be really triggering to students in recovery. So it's important that we understand the technology with vapes and its relation to drug consumption. Because it's hard to tell when someone's using a dab vape pen, things that people can look for are the side effects of the person using it, such as bloodshot eyes, delayed speech, and slurred speech. This next slide does not have a picture of paraphernalia, so if you had to look away, you can come back now. To give you an example of how substance use and technology has changed, it has also changed in terms of social media. One of the study participants relapsed after being exposed to drugs at a school study group off campus. The participant, AJ, is a senior at Walter University. After being exposed to dab vape pens at a final exam study group, he felt really triggered. He went to a Narcotics Anonymous meeting where he was told to delete contacts from his phone. However, what older members in NA and AA may not realize is that modern communication for these students does not require phone numbers. Students communicate through social media, and just deleting someone's phone number doesn't mean they've deleted access to illicit drugs. AJ was also given advice from his NA sponsor that he had a week to think about using. But older sponsors may not realize that these students are able to go on social media and obtain drugs within minutes. So while AJ was told he had a week to think about using, he got on Facebook and obtained heroin within minutes. Drugs can now be obtained 24 hours a day, 7 days a week by the online sale of illicit drugs. Even without social media, all 8 participants in this study could obtain any drug anytime just being in the college atmosphere in the United States. 5 of the 8 participants are former members of Greek life, and they said their dues provided constant access to hard drugs. So once fraternity and sorority members pay their dues, they are guaranteed access to hard drugs like cocaine and ecstasy for the rest of their time there. We also have to remember that while there are many misconceptions about drug use and addiction and recovery on college campuses, a lot of students get their drugs for free. I've heard the misconception that only rich kids do drugs. We have to remember that is not the case, that there are students who get drugs for free on college campuses. Research has found that ecstasy use was actually higher for females. We may be understanding of the tradition of females at college getting free drinks. We have to remember that that also applies to illicit drugs. So the female participants stated in the study that as females, they got free access to drugs. So AJ, the senior at Walter University, describes the problem using social media for recovery. So not only can students purchase illicit drugs on social media, because of data mining, it also presents some problems when students attempt to use social media for recovery purposes. AJ said, if I delete Facebook, I lose access to people in recovery, so it's complicated. Social media is definitely a trigger. There's ads for marijuana and alcohol. I feel like they know I'm an addict. I asked, do you mean data mining? And he said, yes. AJ said, Facebook has access to all of our data. They sell it to third-party organizations, and then these ads pop up. I think I'll delete Facebook. I asked, are you worried it might be isolating leaving Facebook? And he said, yeah, that's the only thing. So AJ really struggles with this double-edged sword. He joined Facebook so he could find out where local AA meetings are, Collegiate Recovery Program events, but Facebook uses data mining, knowing that he's in recovery, and then that generates ads for alcohol, marijuana, dad vape pens, and it even changes the algorithm that matches him with local friends. So when a student joins a Collegiate Recovery Program group on Facebook or uses their browser to search for AA meetings, Facebook will suggest friends that sell illicit drugs. Facebook uses an algorithm for data mining that uses repeated words. So if a student like AJ is searching for a marijuana anonymous group, Facebook will actually match him with other users, other Facebook friends that use the word marijuana. That means that students in collegiate recovery or just students in addiction recovery are actually matched with nearby drug dealers. Because Facebook uses data mining and geolocation, they will match people who use repeated words. That means people in recovery are targeted by Facebook and matched with local drug dealers. Online drug dealers have become increasingly sophisticated. They have Black Friday sales, promo codes, free delivery, and they have encrypted cashless payment forms like Bitcoin and Venmo. On the right is a picture of an ad on social media that it does not violate the terms of Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, or Snapchat. As you'll note, the ad on the right does not mention the name of a drug, it uses emojis. So while this ad is for marijuana, because they do not state the word marijuana, this is not an ad that violates social media use. This ad shows that the drug dealer is willing to send free delivery, meet up, and will not speak to anyone who is a snake, rat, or a cop. So relying on social media sites to ban data mining and stop the illicit sales of drugs is not really a reliable option, as they've taken no action to prohibit the sale of illicit drug on their sites. One recommendation is for CRCs to rethink how they recruit their members. Social media is not a safe place for many in recovery, and many students in recovery don't feel comfortable on Facebook and Instagram. So there might be different ways to recruit students, such as mass text, emails, or physical posters on campus, as there is a growing number of college students in recovery that just don't feel safe on social media, but they also don't want to lose access to the collegiate recovery community. To give you another example, drug dealers who use emojis and don't mention drugs aren't breaking the rules of social media. Facebook and Instagram, as well as Snapchat and Twitter, do not ban the sale of illicit drugs as long as drug dealers do not use the actual words. So this is another example. So these are the emojis that drug dealers use online. As long as they use, say, a picture of a horse to sell ketamine or heroin, their account won't be taken down by Instagram or Snapchat. Or if they use a pill emoji or a snowflake emoji to mean cocaine, again, they're not banned from Instagram. So Instagram permits the illicit sale of drugs online, as well as Facebook and Snapchat. Facebook, Instagram, which is the same company, is considering launching a task force, but Snapchat has failed to act or comment. So this is an increasing problem that people need to be made aware of. The second theme that I found in the findings were the benefits of CRCs and CRPs. Study participants overwhelmingly found great success in CRCs and CRPs, and they stated benefits that were academic in terms of personnel, safety, social, and therapeutic. As many of you know, students really benefit from addiction recovery trained advisors, sober spaces, addiction counselors, and that CRPs are a safe space. They also like sober activities, and as many of you know, CRPs and CRCs have a 95% success rate, meaning only 5% of students in CRCs and CRPs actually relapse. While there are limited studies on AA's maintained sobriety, recent research has shown that the highest maintained sobriety rate for AA and 12-step members is 50%. So really nothing compares to the success rate of CRCs and CRPs. And for those of you who don't know, CRCs and CRPs is a term that's used interchangeably to represent an institutionally sanctioned program for students in collegiate recovery seeking a degree in higher education. Theme C is policy solution. While a lot of researchers, policymakers have conducted research and then come up with their own policy solutions, I felt it was important to ask the actual participants, what did they want and what did they need? So here is a list of policy solutions as suggested by research participants. They suggested academic, social, therapeutic, personnel, physical resources, and policies. Students wanted to see 24-hour libraries, sober study groups, sober retreats, concerts, roommates, and in terms of therapy, they were interested in light therapy, meditation. They also thought it'd be helpful to have residential advisors in recovery and to have suicide prevention. At college campuses in the United States, suicide is the second leading cause of death for college students, but only 14 states in the United States require colleges to have suicide prevention. At both research sites, Walter University and Middletown University, they both had varying degrees of suicide prevention. At Walter University, the large university, there was no same-day suicide prevention. Any students who had suicidal thoughts were told to go to the emergency room, which in the United States can cost between $600 and $3,000. At Middletown College, students were told that they could get same-day help, but if they wanted continued therapy, they would need to find help off campus. So there is a strong need for suicide prevention in all 50 states in the United States, not just 14. Students also really wanted sober housing and an enforcement of sober living, as well as off-campus sober living. In the United States, we have what's called substance-free housing. It's different than sober living. Substance-free housing means the college or university would like the space to be substance-free, but they will not enforce it, monitor it, or ensure that drinking and other drugs are consumed. Therefore, students living in substance-free dorms are by no means substance-free. Neither research site had sober living. Sober living is different because there's an actual monitoring of drug use in the dorms. So there's an overwhelming need for sober housing on college campuses in the United States. Off-campus student living is also really dangerous. Unlike on-campus student housing, off-campus student housing has no residential advisors, no securities. They have no monitoring enforcement of drug policies, no way to even report drug and alcohol use. The landlords don't live there. There's literally no supervision. So they can be very dangerous. Also, because off-campus student housing is a third-party company, students cannot even report illegal drug use to the university or to the local police. Students also wanted more accountability from public safety, Greek life, athletic coaches, housing, and they wanted recovery ally and naloxone training for all, as well as testing strips for illicit drugs. As fentanyl has increasingly been found in cocaine, students found it was important for United States schools to have testing strips to ensure that their drugs did not have deadly adulterants like fentanyl. They also wanted to see more naloxone training. As many of you know, naloxone is an opiate overdose reversal, which can be given by injection or nasal spray. While naloxone exists in both research site health centers, none of the students are made aware of this fact. Both research sites, like many schools in the United States, rely on a don't ask, don't tell policy for naloxone. That means that schools aren't allowed to actively say, we have naloxone if you need it. Students have to somehow know that it's in their health center and go and ask. Also, naloxone is not covered by a lot of insurance policies. So in the United States, a naloxone injector, which is definitely more beneficial than the inhaler, the nasal spray, can cost upwards of $5,000 to $6,000. Even the nasal spray, which is nowhere near as effective in reversing an opiate overdose, can cost a student about $150 to $180. So naloxone is really missing from United States college campuses. Students are not allowed to give them out or use them. They have to pay for them, sometimes out of pocket, and very few college students have an extra $5,000 to spend on a naloxone auto-injector. In terms of areas for future research, what a lot of you may have noticed is that when we look at addiction recovery research on college students, there's really an underrepresentation for LGBTQ+ students, students of color, and incarcerated students. As many of us know, people of color are underrepresented in college and collegiate recovery programs due to the school-to-prison pipeline, the war on drugs, and the mass incarceration of people of color. In the United States, a lot of people of color are just left out. There really is an underrepresentation of people of color in collegiate recovery programs, communities, and college itself. Therefore, future addiction studies need to be conducted so that we're not silencing the stories of these populations. Future research sites for addiction recovery also need to include middle schools and high schools. High school drug use is one of the highest indicators for addiction later on in college, and it's also important that we look at non-predominantly white institutions. As I mentioned before, the majority of research on this issue is done by public health researchers, which is quantitative. While quantitative data is important, we really aren't getting the participants' stories. So there's a real need for action research, which focuses on social justice, focus groups, mixed methods, just more qualitative methods in general. We also need more researchers like people in recovery, critical race theorists, and sociologists. People with these backgrounds can really look into systems of social justice, oppression, and the silencing of the narrative of students in addiction recovery. It's really important that participants in addiction recovery tell their own stories. So for the final part of this presentation, I'll be going over how to duplicate the study I've just presented to you. As I'm sure many of you are researchers and have written academic journals and things like that, I won't be going into too much detail into duplicating the study, but you're free to contact me if you'd like more guidance. So the study I did was a dissertation study. So I'll be showing you how to do a long study if that's your dissertation, or how to make it a shorter study. I wrote a 300-page dissertation and my study took 7 months. So I'll be showing you how to do a quicker study if you're more interested in a 20-page paper, or if you just want to do research on your own CRC to see how well your students are doing. So step 1, decide what you want to know. You can use my interview questions, which I'll share next, or write your own. Maybe you want to know what's working in your CRC, what students like about it. Or maybe you want to interview students who aren't in a CRC and compare the resources they have. You can also take this time to ask students in the Collegiate Recovery Program to help you write your interview questions. I asked someone in recovery to help me write my interview questions. So you can write your interview questions, but I also encourage you to include the participants in this way. It's a great way to get students involved in the process and to really understand that they have agency and the power to control their own narrative. Step 2, design the study and make a research timeline. Decide how much time you have. Is this a study you want to do over the summer, over the year? And then assemble your team and apply for IRB approval. So IRB is your university's Office for Research Compliance to make sure that you're doing an ethical study. While I did my ethnographic study by myself, I recommend that you get together a team of 2 to 3 people. Getting together a research team will really help facilitate good discussion, and you can delegate the workload, like having people conduct multiple interviews at once, transcribing interviews, and always working on the project. So make your research timeline. If you're going for a smaller study, something like a 20-page paper, conference presentation, you can fill out your timeline and leave some time for recruitment. Then step 3, you're going to decide the eligibility for the study and recruit 8 to 10 participants. Unlike quantitative data that requires hundreds, if not thousands of participants, with qualitative methods, you only need 8 to 10. 8 is really the bare minimum for a qualitative study, and more than 10 just isn't manageable. So because I'm an English professor and I don't actually work in collegiate recovery, my recruitment of participants took an entire year. So I spent an entire year just getting 8 students, 4 from each college. So the benefit of people working in collegiate recovery is you already have your participants. You might be able to recruit 8 to 10 students in collegiate recovery in the space of an hour. So that's really going to be a quick part of already being in the community. Eligibility is pretty simple. I kept mine 18 years or older because that ensures you're not interviewing any minors. I also decided to restrict it to people in recovery, but keep in mind that relapse would not bar anyone from eligibility in addiction recovery. And then I also decided that I wanted to have students with on-campus living experience because I was really interested in the impact of housing on the college drug epidemic. However, you can define your eligibility however you'd like. It's just pretty standard to have them 18 years or older in collegiate recovery. And then you can kind of decide your eligibility from there. Maybe you just want to focus on Greek life students. You just want to focus on female students, male students. Decide your eligibility with your research team to help you answer your questions. After you've decided your eligibility, you can recruit participants. I recommend using pseudonyms for participants, generating fake names, and not releasing their identity, as I believe it provides a safe space for them to really share their truth. But it's up to you. Step 4, collecting the data. So you can interview students one-on-one or do a focus group. So I'll go over the pros and cons of each method. So I chose to do personal one-on-one interviews. Again, I had more time doing a dissertation study. I took about 3 to 4 months and I interviewed all 8 participants 3 times. So I conducted a total of 24 one-on-one interviews. The benefits of one-on-one interviews is I believe it provides a safe space for students to really just feel comfortable. No one else is listening. They can just kind of talk freely and I can get into longer conversations. The downside of one-on-one interviews is they do take a lot of time. So if you want a quicker study, a focus group is a great way to do that. With a focus group, you can interview 8 to 10 participants all at once. So if you're looking to write a 20-page academic article or just do some assessment of your collegiate recovery community, I'd highly recommend a focus group. Again, you can just conduct one focus group with 8 to 10 participants, record it, transcribe it, and have your data ready to go. The only downsides of a focus group is some students may have social anxiety and not feel comfortable sharing in a group. And it's also kind of difficult when you're recording to make sure you understand who's talking when you go to transcribe the interview. So again, the benefits are it's definitely quicker, but it can make transcription and recording a little difficult. But generally, if students are already in a CRC where they feel safe and comfortable with their group, then you don't really have to worry about them sharing. So focus groups are really great and really quick. So again, you can decide if you want to do 1 round of interviews in 1 month and then be ready to go, or if you want to do a longer study like I did. The longer study like I did can take 7 to 8 months. So I did 3 rounds over 3 months. However, if you're writing a 20-page academic article or assessing your own CRC, I recommend doing 1 round of interviews in 1 month, either one-on-one or in a focus group. All you need to record interview audio is a smartphone. I bought an expensive ethnographic recorder and I found that my iPhone had better audio quality. There's also tons of great apps that will permit you to record an interview, a phone call, and in the same app, you can send it out for transcription. So that means I could record using my iPhone And then with the click of a button on the app, I would send it out. And by the time I got home, I'd have a full hour of interview data transcribed and ready to go. So really all you need for this study is an iPhone. Step 5 is analyzing the data. To help with transcription, I use a service, and if you email me, I'm happy to recommend one. If you don't have any funding, you can also use a graduate student to transcribe the interviews. You can use an intern, anyone who needs credit in their graduate program. It's a great way to give someone the experience of learning how to transcribe interviews. You can also transcribe interviews yourself if you don't have the resources, if you don't have the funding. So the benefits of hiring someone for transcription is it's just a great time saver, but the benefits of transcribing interviews yourself is you really get to know the data well. You can also use coding software to find emergent themes and patterns. Again, coding is a qualitative method where you're looking for repeated phrases, words, but you can also use Control F. So that means once you have your interview transcripts, you just hit Control F, which is the find function on your computer. So for example, I used Control F and looked for the word sad. I looked for how often students might be using the word sad. And then I tried to look for patterns, what made them sad. So you can use a coding software program, but again, if you don't have funding and you don't have a lot of time, there's plenty of ways to do a quick study for free. Step 6, write your findings and then send for publication or conferences. The way you write your findings will depend on what you want to do with your data. So you can decide you may want to present at a conference, you may want to send it out for an academic article, or you may want to do assessment for substance abuse prevention and look at what's working in your CRC and what might need more help. So that's why it's great to have a research team of 2 to 3 people so you can bounce ideas off each other and decide what you want to do with your data. The great thing about qualitative data is it does not expire. So let's say that you do your interviews, your focus groups, and you've got all this great data, but maybe you don't have time to write up the findings until the following summer. That's totally fine. You can conduct a focus group, one-on-one interviews, and then return to your data later in the summer when you have time, and then write it up for publication and conferences. So again, you can do this study for free with just a smartphone. You can do a 1-month study, write up a paper, and be prepared to present at the ARHE conference in 2021. If you need ideas, there are quite a few dissertations and studies on collegiate recovery, and you can follow their designs. You'll probably hear from a lot of different presentations during this conference this summer, where you'll hear about people sharing their research designs. So one recommendation I have is when people share their research designs, just take a few notes and see what you would like to do. There aren't enough dissertations and studies on collegiate recovery as I would like, but there's at least 20 to 30. So you can search ProQuest for dissertations or use your university library. I've included some sample interview questions here, but again, you can write your own. So again, this is just using what's called phenomenology, is the daily life. I wanted to ask students what their everyday experiences were like, how it made them feel, and you'll notice I used open-ended questions. If you do use yes or no questions, just follow it up. So for example, when I asked, have you ever received treatment? I followed that up with, tell me about those. Or do you think your college experience is different from students not in recovery? How so? So again, I encourage you to include students in writing the questions with you so that they have agency in controlling their own narrative. You can write your own questions or contact me for more interview questions. And also I recommend semi-structured interviews, which means I stuck to the same questions with every participant, but I also provided space for students to go off on tangents, tell other stories, just whatever came into their mind. So be open to going off topic and seeing what you can learn from every participant. So I'd like to thank everyone for attending this presentation. This PowerPoint includes a list of references, and it's got my email here. So please feel free to contact me with questions about designing your own studies, or if you have questions about my findings. I'm happy to recommend apps for recording interview audio, transcription, and analyzing data. I didn't name specific companies and apps here as I didn't really want to give free advertising, but if you email me, I'm more than happy to recommend some apps. I really want to thank everyone working in collegiate recovery for the good work you do every day. As a college professor, I was just overwhelmed to learn how much hard work collegiate recovery program directors do, and I really appreciate the work that you do to keep students safe, happy, while ensuring they make progress towards their degree. Please enjoy the rest of the conference and be well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dory. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this. Just as a reminder, everybody, this will be available on YouTube, and you have Dory's contact details there. Thank you so much again.
Thank you.